And so how do you recommend uploading a lot of data at one time if there's a
Yeah, the easiest way is using the data update action. It does require a little bit of data transformation just because you'll need to match each key with the field ID. But that's the easiest because then once you put that in a variable somewhere, you can just take that entire array and just pass it to the data update action, and then that will just trigger the save. The key thing is, I'm assuming it's creating new records, right? If so, you just need to make sure that the ID in each object just has 0, and that's how it knows to create a new record. That's my method. I don't know, Drew, what other methods you've done?
That's what I would say too. It's like it's kind of hidden because when you go to update a record, like when you use the action, it gives you field value like inputs, but you actually switch that off and just like set your own variable of an array. Instead of one object, you set an array of objects, and it'll take that. And so if you set an array where the IDs match something in your database, it'll update them. If you set an ID of 0 or leave out the ID, it'll create a new record. So if you kind of understand those rules, that's how you can like mix and match and get whatever you need done data wise. You know, if you're adding new, or you can like mass update records that way too.
Okay. Has no one created like I feel like I heard one time about someone doing like an import, like it's using one of the actions in there. Is there like
there's a CSV to JSON import? So you could use that as a first step, CSV to JSON, and the JSON that comes out. If you have control of the data, you put a column and you make ID equals 0, and then you export a CSV. You go CSV to JSON, paste that JSON into the update action. It'll create a bunch of records. Or you could like manipulate the JSON in Bildr if you don't have control originally. You just have to make it say ID 0 in there in each record.
So with that method, we're talking about building like a tiny UI where you would upload a CSV spreadsheet, and then you would have the action set to convert it and then go create the records in the database.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Has anyone?
We should probably make it easier.
Like I was going to say. Okay, I was going to say if we could. This is one of those things that would be a really great bounty to do, to be discussed. I will add that to my list.
Yeah, and we actually have plans down the road to have an actual import method within data collections.
Yeah.
You know, where you could export the schema.
Yeah.
So you can fill in your data and then just import.
I think it's halfway built, actually.
Yeah, Mark started on it, I believe so. We just need to get back to it.
Okay. All right. So hopefully, Dominic, that helps point you in the right direction. But if not, I can ask in Discord to see if anyone has created that. Maybe they could just share it as a pattern real quick, and then you could use it. So I'll check on that. But okay, that's helpful as far as pointers go. All right, and then we do have a question from Web3DevDoc Superstar, who is asking, what is the Bildr team's recommended best practices or tips and tricks for managing versioning code in the studio, specifically changes to functions in JavaScript? So talk to me.
I mean, as far like we have ways we do it, which Dorian could speak to better than I can. But I don't know. We're like not as buttoned up as you might expect. We're like as buttoned up as we'd like to be, I feel like, but we don't do like very strict version control where we're like watching everything and backing everything up. But at the same time, Bildr is like backing up everything all the time. There's always copies. Every time you publish, saves all the old stuff. So we kind of just, I feel like we're like a little bit looser than you'd expect with that. But at the same time, we don't really ever get in trouble because we have everything we ever need.
Yes, well, that's not helpful for them.
No,
they can't access that. Okay, so just so you guys know, And what Drew's alluding to is like, there's literally a record captured of every single change that's ever made. The intention for that is for us to release a kick-ass debugger, and also allow you to basically revert any change that you've ever made back to any previous state. So that's kind of like part of a bigger thing that we really want to do on the roadmap. But could you talk about like concepts, Drew or Dorian, like how would you do it without having access to that? So like, say you change a function, like maybe we could talk about deployments, or, you know, like, is there a way to do that? Or could you maybe do something with a pattern? Like, so if you create something before you modify it, is there a way to capture the state of that thing?
Well, I think in this context, I think that it's about like actual code. So it's not like saving your whole project states. And in this case, like if I make a custom action, so like all the actions in the studio are just actions like go in a project, or any of us go in a project, we make an action, and then we share it into the studio. That project has the same like publishing process. So I can publish it to test if I wanted to, I can publish it to a production or a patterns deployment. And we're using that patterns deployment. So technically, if I have an action that I make and it's like, there's like a central project for it, like a source of truth project, that project, every time I publish to patterns is how I update it. So that's creating a record by default. So I'm not actually doing anything for version control, but it's saving an old version that I can go into the deployments on the left menu bar. I can go into deployments and roll it back to an old one at any point if I wanted to. So that's kind of how we would control that. And it'd be the same thing if you create an action, like whatever project that's in, you could publish out to deployments. You create snapshots or backup deployments too, and do your own system, but that would probably be the best way to handle it.
Yeah, and then originally, or we do envision upgrading that further down the road. Like I was thinking of like having an integration to GitHub within the functions so you can tie it to a repository, because then you can do all your commits, roll it back, do whatever you can do with GitHub. But we'll just have to see where that lands in the priority list. But yeah, I run into the same issues. And right now I actually keep those function changes separate outside of Bildr. And I just kind of do my own thing and I just copy and paste them as I make changes. But to get something like that, it'll definitely require some sort of integration.
Where do you keep them separate, Dorian? Because it could be useful for him, like your method.
I just use an application on Mac. It's called Snippets Lab. And yeah.
You could use GitHub for that too. You can use any GitHub repo and just copy and paste it back. That seems like a lot of extra work. Like in my experience, so when I first came into Bildr, I would have done that probably, but like in my experience, I've never actually rolled back, or I've never run into it. So at this point, I'm a little looser with that, I think.
Yeah, I actually never rolled back either. Sometimes I'll break it, but you know, I'm in the middle of it.
That's the thing. When you break things in Bildr, it's always easy to fix. And it's like as a coder, it was like weird for me to get my head around that, but that's how I feel. Like I don't miss the undo at all. But when I first came into Bildr, I could feel like I couldn't function without an undo. And I know I was so scared to try anything. And now it's like, if I break something, I'll just go fix it. So it's kind of weird.
Let me ask you, would it be helpful at all, or could you do any sort of versioning control with like duplicating a function and editing that, and then kind of like swapping that out on the action? Or is that like too much? Is that too bulky? Because I'm thinking like you can easily duplicate it, edit that thing, and then just copy and paste if it is what you want to use, right?
Yeah, you definitely can do that. You just have to know where to change the ID references in the JSON of the action type. Because essentially you can remove the function and add it, but that's tedious because then you have to go reset all your arguments and all the details. But yeah, any method can get it done. It's just, there's not a pretty way to do it in Bildr right now.
Okay. Okay, any feedback on that? Let me see. If you is it share the chat in the screen share, Ray?
Or share like what we're talking about, probably, right?
Oh,
Well,
yes, yeah.
I don't know if I can share. I can probably try to share something. I don't know exactly what I'd show.
Yeah, usually we do, Ray, for the ones that are not as concept oriented. But maybe we could show how you would duplicate a function, Dorian, and swap something out, swap the IDs out. That'd be helpful?
I
Yeah,
can
we
probably
can.
show that if you want. My screen's up.
Yeah,
I was gonna go to one of these actions. Like I just have these projects that start with action, which is how I keep track of my actions. And if they have a pattern here, that means it's an action that's in the studio usually. So if I go in here, it's like I can put things in here like notes if I wanted, because it's a project. And the only thing that I'm actually publishing out is the action. So I can put whatever I want. So I usually have like a little demo for myself, and sometimes I'll have like an old demo and a new demo. So I'm sort of doing a little version control in a way, like in a weird way there. But really it's like about publishing. So it's like if I made a change in here, there's this action for the studio. This actual action here is what everyone uses. Like if you drag in this DOM to image action into your project, it's coming into this project and pulling this action. So any changes I make to this, like even in the JSON here, once I make those changes and then publish to the patterns branch, so I come up here and just publish like normal into here, then in the future, it won't change anyone's existing project, but in the future, when someone brings it in, it comes in with the new stuff. So in that way, this publish is my version control every time I publish to patterns. And then this developments section over here has some things you can do. So I can come to patterns, and if I click on it, there's like I can change this revision and roll it back. I honestly I never do it, so I don't know. I feel like there's some things to watch out for maybe in this, or we get more complex. I know we discussed it like months ago. We kind of talked about this stuff a bunch.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how it would work really, is like if I made a mistake or if I did something and introduced a bug into that action that I didn't understand, I would just roll it back right here with this change revision. It gives no warnings, because it's like putting something else into the dev branch and then you have to publish back out in the patterns.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to use patterns necessarily, right? Like you could just create a deployment that's like, function X changing Y, whatever. Or
Yeah, you can come into here and just hit new deployment and make as many as you want. Even just put a timestamp for the name as a backup. It really depends what you're doing. Because yeah, in my case, I was actually referring to like putting out actions into the studio for everyone, which no one else can do except the team. So it's not really relevant. But if you're doing it for yourself, like if it's through a pattern, it's actually the same thing. Like if you make a pattern that is an action and you're pulling it into your other projects, every time you publish to patterns, that's when it changes. So then you have that change log basically.
Yeah. Essentially, anytime you publish to any environment / deployment, those are interchangeable, it creates a revision, basically a state of your project at that time of the publish. And then for any of your deployments, you can change the revision. So for your dev deployment, if you like the state of your function, before you go making changes to it, you can just publish that, right, to any sort of deployment, either a new one, the default ones that come in there, which are test and production, or if you've created a pattern, right? And so you've captured a state of that. Then in your dev deployment, your working version in the studio, you can make the changes to the function. And then if it's good, you can create another revision by publishing that out somewhere, or if you mess it up and you want to revert it, you can just change the revision of your studio to the one that you had published out. So it can get a little bit, but it looks like hopefully that will be enough right now. We are going to make some changes to the UI in the next cycle after this one to kind of clean up the publish process. And also just allow you to enter in notes, right? So that you don't have to put all of it in the name of the deployment. You can just be like, okay, as part of this publish, these are the things that I changed. And then that way you have a record of that. Looks like Fraser has a question. Does the revision list jumble all of the deployment sources? Last I checked, they were unsorted, time-stamped by name. I think they're sorted now. correctly by date time. Drew, can we go into, let's go into a deployment and then see if we can click the change revision. We won't actually do it, but I just want to see real quick. If you click into the revision. Yeah, so it'll show you sorted by date and time of all the times you've published, but it doesn't tell you specifically here whether that was a revision you created by publishing to dev or test or production. And that is one of the things that I believe we're going to be updating in the UI soon. It'll either capture that information or you can give it a name. And then you can select that, right? So you'll know exactly, if you use a naming convention correctly, what exact revision you're using. But right now, kind of like what I do is I have in my notes app, anytime I publish, like I just make a list, like here's the stuff that's included and this is the revision that I created. I just take a note of the time and I'm like publish from dev to production, or dev to test. So yeah, it's kind of something you kind of have to hack together. If you guys have any suggestions for something that you'd really like to see, tell me so that we can consider it when we're finalizing the UI for the next round of changes we're going to be doing to the publish process. But hopefully that is a little bit, let's see.
So didn't we have an action that I thought we put it in, but maybe we didn't put it in the studio yet, that runs when you deploy? So that if someone's like looking at this at a site in production and it gets updated, you can like run, have a little pop-up or force them to refresh or something?
Yeah, we have it. It's on the page. So you'd actually set that on your root page.
Can we check that out real quick? Tell me, what is this for?
If you go to the page body, basically they're asking if we can, like, if there's a way, or be nice to have a feature to trigger a set of actions after you create or publish to a deployment and it's successful, kind of to either trigger off some automatic test or send an email to the user saying, hey, there's a new update or something. But yeah, I forgot that there is an action already. It's called run or flow to run when revision is out of date. And that when you publish, because the revision ID changed, it'll actually trigger whatever flows you have set here.
So you have to like have it open. Yeah,
you
kind of
can do
make a
that.
little thing. Yeah.
Because if that, well, the problem with that is, I was just thinking like to trigger the email to send to the users. Because if you have multiple users, it's going to run that action on every instance, unless you specifically trigger that user only. But the problem with that is, what if the user doesn't have it open?
You could do like, you could trigger it and then check if it's like your user ID specifically. So you would sign in to one thing, that was the only one that'll trigger it. You could get it done, a little workaround.
Yeah, or you can just create an admin area.
Oh, that's true.
Oh,
yeah.
an admin page
That you just have open, and that's the one that runs the flow, and we'll just send the email to all your users.
Like just mass email your users. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, you can get it done now.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So any more questions kind of around revision? It sounds like we have a lot of work to do, but there are some potential hacks that you might be able to piece together to keep it a little bit organized. But yeah, any other questions on kind of like the revision or any of these like settings we're looking at? No. Okay. All right. So before we move to Drew's next part of the tutorial for how to create content blocks, which is essentially really good method to do long form text. Does anyone have any specific questions or stuff that they need help troubleshooting in their projects? Please either unmute and chime in or chat in the channel and we can make sure we get them answered. So let me just take a look.
I've got one, well, two. One's a quick one and the other is kind of I guess, best practice, how you would go about building something out. But basically, I want to show like a splash page on first login where a user would like acknowledge something and then it wouldn't show again. And also like once they're in the first time, run like highlight different sections, like click here, do this, set up that. And then once it's done, kind of cancel that out. How would you build that out? Using conditions, or I wasn't really sure.
Yeah, well, I would do like a on the user, add a column into the database that says like,
Sorry, can we open up the studio real quick? Just taking on Ray's suggestion that maybe having something visual to look at, even if we don't build out the whole thing, would be helpful. Thanks,
Start building it.
Thanks, Ray.
Yep.
Because we do this ourselves when it's your very first time signing up and you get into the studio. There's a check that we run, and if you're brand new, you'll see like I think an option to sign up for the newsletter, and then also like clicking the terms of service, reading those and accepting that. So yeah, what are your recommendations, Drew, for how to
So
set
this is exactly what we do in that scenario. I'll just come into users, and you can add a field for, I don't know what you'd call it, but say it was like onboarded. And I didn't change that type. I mentioned last week too, you don't really have to, but you could change that type to a Boolean for like true or false. So if it's 1 or 0, like if they're onboarded or not onboarded. And then by default, they're not 0, it's blank. So when they come to this, whatever page you want to check, so if it's your home page, or you can put this in a header so that it checks on every page, you can just come into page load or page binding. I usually do stuff like this on page binding. I don't really think it matters in this case, since it's a user, but you add an action that's a conditional.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, you can just come from current user info. So like you're assuming they're already signed in to be on this page, I guess. So you might have to do other stuff before this, but current user info, and then have this onboarded here.
Yeah.
So you can say like greater than 0, usually cover most things. I don't mean it's true. And then you'll run a flow, and then that flow, basically like I usually do something like I would make a flow called like set state, because it's gonna like set the onboarded state or onboarding. And then you can run that flow, and maybe it like adds little pop-ups, or maybe it queues stuff up or changes or overlays, whatever you want to do in there.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and you have the lightbox elements in there, which would be perfect for that. So just popping open that lightbox, and then when it's, if you're making if it's just something you're showing them, then I think you can just run the setting of the state in conjunction with showing it to them, right? But if it's something that you need them to like check, you would add something before that.
Well, that's the beauty of doing it just with this flow, is you can add as many things as you want in there. So it might have like a million actions, you find.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Does that help, Alex?
Totally. That's
Oh, and then like last thing to mention is when they do whatever, when they close out of it or when they check a box, that's when you do have to do the update user, like update record, and then change that onboarded to 1 or to true.
Yeah.
That way they know next time they come in, it'll be true. Yeah.
for sure. Okay, cool. Thanks so much.
Wait, what was the second part of that question, Alex? Was it answered by this?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
it was the Drew, remember that set as money pricing thing? I'm still hung up on that, but it's
really? We should look at it, because you've been hung up on it for a while. It's got to be something weird.
To be honest, I worked on it last week and then I just moved past it. So it's not really it's not hanging me up anymore, but it's still the
Do you want to pull it up real
let's
quick,
do
Alex?
it.
I don't think
Share my screen, yeah.
anyone has any questions, so we'll just do this and then we'll hop over to Drew's content blocks.
I did have a thought too on this. I totally forgot. So like there's something we can check off the bat.
Yeah.
And maybe we can fix it right away.
So Alex, can you explain to us for anyone who wasn't here in the last session what you're trying to do?
For sure. So let me pull up here. You can hopefully see that. This price here, this is basically it's via API, it's pulling the Bitcoin price. And if I have it in the app, you can see it's just a figure. There's no dollar sign. So I have made it work before. Like it's 0 there. If I had other data in there, it's all formatted as money, but I can't get this one to work. And it's coming in via API. We're setting it as a variable and then setting that variable into the element. And then I think there's some other stuff going on, but basically I tried the format as money action. And I've used it everywhere else in my app, so I don't know why I can't get it working here.
Oh, it works other places in this app? Because then I think my idea.
Everywhere else in the app.
Oh, okay, so it's not what I thought.
Just the one spot.
Maybe it's the order, or maybe we need to set it to wait.
Where's
Like-
the format as money action being triggered? Because I didn't see it in that flow.
No, so I've deleted it now. So I've built it like
Gotcha.
every which way, and then I just kind of nuked it because
Got it.
I wasn't sure what wasn't working anymore. So so basically it's pulling the price from an API, setting that result as a variable, and then I believe this is setting the element from the variable under this page binding action.
Yeah.
You should be able to go like right above where it sets it and just replace the variable with the format money.
So like right in there.
Yeah.
So
you
yeah,
probably
right
need to
after.
wait also in between those.
Yeah, I think the Abdo is suggesting that as well.
So that's from the variable. And what do we call this?
No, that's the status code. Be the one above it.
Response.
Yeah. And then you'll need to reset that weight too, because it is on the bottom. Yeah.
And you'll need a path on that API response variable. It's the same, whatever's on the variable below it. Yeah, whatever path's on that. Oh, maybe there's no path. There's the path. Okay.
That one right there.
So yeah, you'll need that in the format as money, that path, because that's where it gets the actual value. So maybe that's why it didn't work.
Oh,
no, I
didn't
did
copy
not.
it. And you only need the results 0. Yeah, there you go.
Oh my God.
Alex, I love seeing
Yeah.
where you are now compared to like when you started. It's just so cool, the level of like complexity that you're doing now. Like, it's,
Well,
yeah.
it wasn't pretty when I started. So
No, it wasn't, but Bildr was not pretty when you started either. And we
I was
still have a
going
long
through
way to
all the
go,
videos I
but
had recorded and like didn't even look the same.
So you're all set there, except
Yeah.
at the bottom is called the variable that's going to output is called number_formatted.
Yeah, just
So
copy that.
that's what you'll need to set into the element.
So into there as the variable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, replace that whole value with that one. There you go. And that should do it.
Move my Zoom window.
it's
We're okay.
programmers.
That should have done it. Let me check my idea. I'll tell you a couple things that click. And that original thing I thought might be wrong. Basically the action at one point got updated. So I'm wondering if you pulled this action in like right away when it was released, because it got updated like really quickly. So let me point out a bug. So it might be the old one, but it's just, you just add a couple characters. But if you go on the left of right where you are to that arrow, you know, the actions, yeah. And then at the top, go to functions. In here, there's one called format as money somewhere. You can search for it or scroll down. Yeah. Check that. And then I just want to check this first line. JavaScript tab, sorry. Yeah, see, it's missing. It's like missing one thing. That's crazy. You must have gotten it like right when it got released. But on line 1, like almost where your cursor is, right before that semicolon, just write plus quote quote. I'm just going to convert that to a string. Basically, we didn't realize because in our tests the number actually was a string, that when you use a real number, it would fail. So we made the update to the app, and you got it too fast, I think. So now I think this might work. If you just have to refresh the preview. If it's this, I apologize. It's really unfortunate. Yeah.
There it is.
This is why we
Thanks
could do
so
it.
much.
I feel bad.
Okay. All right, Alex,
Thank
thank you for letting us check that out. And Drew, nice job on the memory of
I had that
remembering
thought
that.
actually, and then forgot to reach out though. So there was a couple of days lapse where like I remembered that and forgot about it. So I can't congratulate myself.
Yeah, and one small thing to add to that, if you're ever running into like that issue, you can always handle it with the path by adding two strings.
That's right. That's right.
Super. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Alex.